Hi, everyone. I'm Brock Stewart, a program manager at Closed, and we're excited for this special webinar. And join me is my good friend, Ethan Preet. Ethan is the director of product marketing at MX. And Ethan and I have had the opportunity to work with each other for the last couple of years. And today we're going to be talking about how MX has optimized their win-loss program, some of the surprising findings, and some of the actions they've taken to implement necessary changes. And so before we get too far into questions, Ethan, tell us a little bit about yourself and give us a little intro. I know you love pickleball. Tell me more.
Yeah, I appreciate that. Excited to be here. My name is Ethan Preet, as was mentioned. I run product marketing for a fintech company, MX Technologies. We're located in Lehi, Utah. And yeah, some of you might recognize me for my very amateur pickleball career. If I was standing up, you could tell by my frame that I'm definitely a below average pickleball player. But others might recognize me, maybe, probably not, from my LinkedIn profile. Definitely not. But yeah, I've had the pleasure of working with Close now for a few years to run our win-loss analysis, which has been just a really interesting and good use case for our whole company, actually.
All right, Ethan, thank you for that brief intro. I think what would be helpful for everyone starting out just to understand of why MX was looking at a solution in the first place for win-loss analysis. What were some of the driving factors behind that, or were there questions to answer or problems to solve?
Yeah, absolutely. I think when I started at MX, I was about employee 300. So product marketing was still very much in the early days. And as we started that rollout and team development, it became very clear very early on that what we're going to need was a better visibility into what that win-loss cycle was looking like. And some of the challenges that we kept seeing over and over again and the questions that kept popping up from different departments, from revenue to product to marketing, was mainly around that feedback loop. Why were we losing deals? What were our customers or prospects actually saying? What did they like about our products outside of what we get in our typical customer advisory board settings? And how did that ultimately affect what we were seeing in our pipeline and our conversion metrics? And so we began looking instantly for that, obviously. And there are a few providers that we looked at and kind of vetted through. But really, when it came down to it, one of the things that was going to be very important to us was basically counteracting the lack of hygiene that we were seeing in our Salesforce, which was usually, the lost reason was going to be something like ran out of budget or lost communication. And that information just wasn't enough for us. And so what we decided was we'd be more well served if it were more of like an interview format where we could actually serve up the questions, get feedback in a longer form, and then find some way to be able to kind of disseminate that through the company to create that feedback loop.
Very cool. So as you're talking, one thing I kept thinking is how did you or the company decide who would own that? Like who would be responsible for running that? Obviously you're in product marketing. Mm-hmm. I've worked with a lot of different brands and they've owned it at different departments. Why product marketing for you guys?
I think it just made the most sense. Again, product marketing, at least in our case, and for organizations that I have been a part of, it tends to be that middle piece between revenue, product, and marketing. And when you have that one point of contact that can bridge those gaps, I think a lot of times it makes sense because that feedback loop is so critical. What are the setbacks that you're having in product that are affecting revenue? Mm-hmm. What are the revenue questions or concerns or even requests that are coming through back to product? And having that product marketer own that whole cycle, I feel like it just creates this level of efficiency that I've yet to see bested by another contact or department.
No, it's such a great point, and a lot of you watching, or maybe even some of the people I've worked with, are struggling to find that place where they belong as a product marketer. How did you build the credibility?
I mean, from a personal standpoint, going back to my very amateur pickleball career, I can tell you that it did not come from that. Big surprise, I know. I think honestly, what it comes down to is in the same way you'd sell any sort of product externally, mm-hmm. you have to build credibility by adding value. And I think that was the big challenge that we took on very early as well. Of we had to win over some individuals. It's very hard to get adoption when you're making any sort of change in a company. And so being able to basically say now, hey, we're asking you guys to help us identify these either wins or losses in our cycle because we're going to provide this feedback back to you or this value in this way. And it's going to go to product and give you this value, or by us giving you this, now you have talking points for your next conversations. And I think when you bring that value and can showcase that value and package it up in a way that's easily digestible, you start to build that trust naturally. Mm-hmm. And honestly, very quickly, I found as well.
Yeah. I've done a lot of interviewing customers of MX, and the things I found interesting, often were interesting, but MX was able to dig even deeper into some of these interviews and find things that were even surprising to me. Can you tell us a few stories or maybe some particular findings that really helped strengthen your case for win-loss analysis and drive home, like building that credibility and getting everybody bought in?
Absolutely. One of the biggest things that we found very early on with our interviews was a competitive advantage that I think we knew that we had. I don't even think I know that we had kind of this general hypothesis, but we didn't really know how to maximize that. And that was around our ability to set up support teams and delivery. And when we started to see that come through consistently in these interviews, it became a lot easier to kind of take that across teams to say, well, now wait a second, let's get more feedback on that. Let's figure out why. And that really helped us going into like our customer advisory board, any sort of panel or customer interviews. We could ask specific questions to those as well. But that was one example we saw very early on. But even with that though, I'd say a good story for us, a more recent one, was pricing. Pricing is always so difficult, and it's difficult when you're going against multiple competitors trying to figure out how everything stacks up because it's never apples to apples. And once you get into like an RFP process, it's heaven help you at that point because everyone's doing a different format. It's like your worst nightmare, like school project type situation. But one of the things that we found in our latest interview was the pricing that was being proposed was very different than how our competitor was proposing their pricing. And our customers weren't understanding how we were laying out these different line items. And so we knew we had this problem of pricing's obviously not working because we've had a few losses against this particular competitor. But what we were now able to see was it was based on how we were structuring that pricing. And so the problem, we kind of had this hypothesis, but the interview itself helped us identify the specifics of that problem and then also gave us the way to actually take that department to department and say, here's the change we need to make. Here are the customers that are saying this. And it also gives the effect of like, well, if we didn't have this problem, I don't think we would have lost this customer. So it's very tangible.
Yeah. No, such a great example. I mean, when you're going about like presenting back this data, some of the feedback I get is it's hard to convince my sales team to get behind this. Like they're scared of getting this feedback. How did you present that back to the sales team specifically? Maybe it was pricing, maybe other topics that come up. And how did you get the buy-in from sales specifically?
Yeah, it can be tricky, and there are definitely individuals where there was more pushback than others. I think it's a tricky subject because a lot of times there's just a general vulnerability around kind of showing your process and getting that feedback on if you're the sales owner of that account and maybe things didn't work out, then going to actually learn from that experience. But I think it all comes down to trying to create that growth mindset within your organization. I think product marketing has an opportunity that this is not something that I think everybody is going to agree with, but I think you have an opportunity to kind of create that mindset of saying like, look, what we're trying to do at the end of the day is help you to learn from this. Otherwise, a loss is a loss, and then it just stings for everybody. But if a loss becomes feedback that turns into future wins, then I feel like that adds a lot more weight to what you're doing, and it truly becomes a team effort. It's not that you're trying to expose any individual, but you're trying to help that individual to help everybody, including themselves, which hopefully in the future puts more dollars back in their pocket as well.
Yeah. Obviously, besides sales, you mentioned a few others when you were working on your pricing. Who else do you try to get this in front of, and who's been your biggest champion?
I'd say, still within sales, but our CRO, and we've had a few of them since we've been using this program, and it's always been a huge priority. And what that then gives us the weight to do is to take that into other departments like finance. So when we need pricing changes and things, we can go to our deal desk team, we can go to our FP&A team, and we can request those changes with actual proof to kind of show how fast we need to be moving on this, because the impact, again, is very quantifiable.
Yeah.
Product, obviously, as well. We're always with product coming in there with feedback and points saying, hey, just so you guys know, we're hearing these things. Would you be interested in doing either a follow-up session, or is this enough as it is, or can we get more context for you? It's helping us to create a little bit of a bridge between product and other departments, because whatever's mentioned in the interview, whether it's delivery or revenue or finance, we can now bring product into those departments as well, which is helping us, I think, work more collaboratively as a whole. It's a big word, I'm sorry.
Well, the more you talk about it, obviously there's so much more going on than win-loss and these interviews. As at Close, we like to think we're like the most important part of your day-to-day. But how does win-loss fit in with the rest of the systems that you're running?
Yeah, it's a great question, and yes, obviously, I would hope that we were getting enough volume through our closed interviews and things, where we could be doing it all the time, or at least have someone on my team running this all the time. But obviously, it's not the case. And what we found is that it really does embed. And this is, again, my personal opinion, but when you start to embed the win-loss feedback in a lot of the things that at least we're doing in our team, whether it's going to be things like related to the roadmap or our campaigns or any sort of like segmentation, anything like that, it just adds a lot more weight. And I feel like it's more data-driven at that point, because we're doing this because, and we've heard these things, and so we're making these changes. And so I don't think it has to be this massive undertaking every single week or month or day or whatever. But I think it's just being familiar enough with what you're receiving in terms of win-loss feedback to then plant that in strategic places where it can have a big impact.
Yeah, great point. And so on that, how do you use your team to get that information out to different people?
Yeah, so we have a dedicated product marketer specific to managing the closed relationship, and she's incredible, very very talented, very very smart, very very strategic, and so part of her main role is organizing these things, gathering the accounts that we're going to then submit to get interviews with. She's also managing the software. She uses the report tool to pull through all of the keywords, sentiments, things like that, and from there she's able to kind of aggregate this report, which she then gives to our immediate team. And from there, as we're going through the PMMs, meeting with various account owners or product leaders, etc., we're taking this feedback to them as well. So she first kind of enables her own immediate team of product marketers, and then that rolls out to the next level of enablement, which would be sales leadership, our revenue operations team, etc., and then from there down to product as well. So it's very much embedded in all these processes until it eventually rolls all the way up into our company town halls, which we do usually twice a month.
Oh, very cool. So you present these findings to the company. Tell me more about that. What does that usually look like, and how do you present win-loss findings to the full company?
Yeah, it's a big undertaking. It's always very fun and very stressful, but no pressure, right? But at the end of the day, like, what you want to be able to share is the good news that brings the company together. It's hard sometimes. I think it can be easy, particularly in tech, when you have a revenue team that gets praised a lot for closing these deals, and they're working hard and they're working their butts off, and they should get praised for that. But I saw a meme once that had somebody standing up and they were celebrating, and then it showed underneath them and it had somebody lifting up their shoulders. And it was, the salesperson closing a deal, and then it had underneath them, it was like product, marketing, and just listed all the departments, finance, etc., engineering. And I think that's what you got to kind of create as a company. I think that's what we're trying to do. That's the outcome we're looking for, and announcing it to the whole company is, hey, we had this win, and it's a very big team effort. It was a large undertaking. Here's the feedback that we received. And a lot of times it is based around the product itself, right? Because it's what we're trying to sell. And so that gives us the ability to praise the product team, the engineering team, the finance team, et cetera, the support teams that are working so hard on the day-to-day to do that. And so I feel like it's very much a camaraderie moment as well.
Yeah. No, I love that. It's a time of celebration. In those larger meetings, so I'll back up. A lot of times we get asked, is it better to do more win interviews or more loss interviews? And I'll ask you that question, then I'll follow up with on the team meetings.
That's a good question. I feel like I learned a lot more from the losses. That might be a clue. That might be a quote from somebody. Maybe Michael Jordan said that. If not, that's an Ethan quote. You can attribute that to me. But I definitely learned a lot more from the losses than I do most of the time the wins. I think it just gives you a really good chance to make those slight calibrations that make things more effective moving forward. But at the same time, though, like, we get a lot of really good stuff from the wins. I shared a story once. Brock, maybe it was with you, but we had a deal come through that we won where we were up against basically like a hydra of our three biggest competitors that partnered together on this deal. And our price actually came through quite a bit higher than what they were offering as this joint proposal. And the group ended up choosing us, and we got this in the feedback because of the relationships that we had established and how they viewed us as a partner and our support and our delivery, the advantages that I mentioned previously. And that was awesome. Like, that was really incredible feedback for us, because how would we have known that otherwise? That's a pretty big win. And so I think you have the special cases where wins are just that impactful and that awesome. But a lot of times I really appreciate what we get from the losses. But maybe that's a personal opinion. I don't know.
No. Yeah, and yeah, we hear all the time the losses we learn the most from, but the wins is where we can really validate what's going well. And to your point, in those big town hall meetings, to celebrate like great things that are happening and to celebrate everyone's effort. Ethan, this has been awesome. It's been great, especially as we've spent time together over the last couple of years, and I've been able to work with your team and identifying these win-loss customers that we've targeted, and I've been able to do a lot of these interviews. Kind of just wrapping it up, talk to me a little bit more about like importance of win-loss analysis in your position, how that gives you a seat at the table, and what that does for you, your team, and your outlook.
Yeah, absolutely. Let me just start off by saying there are probably some people who are listening today who are just getting started on that journey. And I just want to say, product marketer to product marketer, like I have a lot of empathy because it's very difficult and it's a large undertaking. My guess is that you're probably running thin right now. You have a lot on your plate. I have yet to meet any product marketer who's said at any point in their career, man, I just don't have a lot going on right now. Like it's never been the case. And working so strategically, department to department, it's tough. But that being said, I'd say that the tips I'd give to anybody in that case of just kicking things off, or maybe even what it means to me, is find some way to scale this thing. For us, that meant finding a partner, and the Closed has been great for years now. We've really appreciated the content we've gotten from the team, from Brock specifically, and that has given us the ability to then focus on what we do with it. And one of the things I'd call out specifically is if you're on the fence about whether or not you should invest with your team owning something like this or this initiative, I just say, at least from my perspective, whoever has owned win-loss at our company has always had a seat at the table, because it's the feedback that nobody else can find, and it's the feedback that no one else can get from any other place within the company. And so anytime our CRO is calling a meeting, there's always a spot for whomever has that win-loss. And I would challenge you to look at your team and say, is that something that we want to take on, something that we can own? Is there a partner that can help us do the front-end work so we can then have that go-to-market, whether internally or externally, to use that feedback? And if so, like it's worth it, you know? So it's not an easy process, but I think it definitely pays dividends.
Ethan, thank you so much for sharing some of that insight and helping us understand a little bit more about like just setting up a program, how to make it successful, and making sure you, let's say at this point, keep the seat at the table.
Here's hoping.
Yeah. So yeah, thanks everybody for tuning in. You'll see in the screen following, there's a place where you can access the Closed toolkit and more info of setting up a win-loss program. And yeah, look forward to seeing you on the next webinar.
Thank you.